Welcome back. This segment of the Sports Source is brought to you by Safety Systems. When it comes to automating your home, trust the people at Safety Systems. Control your security system, all the cameras, the lighting. You can control door locks, heat and air, audio, video for your home entertainment system, all that and more right from your smartphone. It's like living on the Starship Enterprise. Safety Systems, folks, they can do it all for you, and they do it easily, and they do it quickly. Great guys at Safety Systems. Find them at safetysystems.com. Call VFL J.J. Surlis to ask about them this week. All right, Tennessee announced this week that its latest round of COVID tests did result in positives for a number of athletes across their sports. They're not getting specific. We don't know how many. We don't know officially how many members football, how many members this sport, that sport. They're not telling you that. Meanwhile, the NCAA this week put out some guidelines, some recommended guidelines, in further proof that the Power Five is. They're not breaking away, but they're certainly doing their own thing more. The Power Five conferences got together and put out their own document that's a little more laid out than what the NCAA's guidelines were. Let's talk about the takeaways from this Power Five deal. First of all, you have to test football players within 72 hours of games, and it has to be a standardized test. So all 65 Power Five schools have to use the same test, apparently. You have to do it within 72 hours of the game. Officials, that's the meaning referees, they've got to be tested weekly. No required tests for coaches and staff. I find that interesting.
Yep.
You know, nobody wants to find that Nick Saban's got a temperature on game day, apparently. Staff members, if they don't get tested, they will have to wear masks on the sidelines. Okay. Positive tests require players to isolate for at least 10 days. So if a guy gets a positive, he's gone for at least 10 days, even if he's asymptomatic. Mandatory 14-day quarantine. This is the biggie for athletes who've had high-risk contact with players who've tested positive. High-risk contact was defined as being within 6 feet of someone for at least 15 minutes with one of the two not wearing a mask. Guys, you're talking about team meetings, position group meetings. I think they're going to be held at gunpoint to wear their masks. Nobody else in our society wants to wear the mask, but these players, I think they're going to make them wear their mask because that's how you can kibosh a season real quick.
Yeah.
And it's 14 days. It's interesting. Minimum 10 days if you test positive, 14-day quarantine if you're just near somebody who tests positive. Interesting.
But even with the 10-day, what if, you know, in your quarterback room, one guy's got it. What if all your quarterbacks are? Is there a scenario where all your quarterbacks could be ineligible to play this next game?
I guess especially quarterbacks are all going to be forced to wear their masks. They're going to staple those things to their faces, I guess.
Well, what stood out to me was it's hard. The 14-day for contact is harsh, and obviously there's not the testing to offset that. And that's the other part of it is there's not enough testing. You talked about the coaches and the staff; they don't have to be tested. Also, in the off season, there's no requirements during the lead up to the season like the regular season, and that's where you need to get control of it. So there's just a lot of issues with this. And oh, by the way, who is determining that every one of the players is within that 15 minutes? Are they going to say, well, no, this guy was only around 13 minutes around another guy, so he's good.
They got a guy. They've got so many assistants now they can just clock each player.
Right. Good luck with that.
Do a lot of line rotation, by the way, so they're not lined up across from each other for a 15-minute period or more.
Right.
Also, the 72-hour window. What if you run into a hiccup? What if you don't get results back in time? If you got a team that has to travel, lining up the travel time and test results, there are a number of things they're going to have to figure out, iron out.
The practice is an interesting point. I'm thinking off the field, but that's exactly. If you've got somebody who tests positive, and you've been practicing with this guy. Mm-hmm. That's going to be 15 minutes, and you're not going to have masks. Yeah, you could lose a team real quick to that. The other thing that we talked about in between segments here that isn't mentioned here, these leagues better have an official from the conference who comes and does the tests and checks the results. If you don't, you are opening it up to 14 fan bases to scream that there's a conspiracy.
No.
They tested Tennessee, but they didn't test Alabama. They didn't test Tennessee, but they did test Kentucky. You're going to hear that every time somebody gets a positive.
Already happened. We've heard.
Yeah,
That sounds like radio show content, though, John.
Right.
So
That's right. Take anything you
there are
can
positive spins, I promise.
get. All right, next is the serious one, and again, we've got more. We'll get into full sports mode here in a second, but you have to talk about this. It's hanging over the season. You can't ignore it. There may not be a season. Literally, the Big 12, the Power 5 leagues put out their own reasons for cancellation for a season. We'll run through those next because right now, I'm afraid you could hit a couple of them. Come on back on the Sports Source. We'll show you what they were.